And certainly turned some heads on Friday. What did Shedeur prove to you?
That he deserved more looks, that he deserves the consideration that some of us thought he deserved coming into the draft. I mean, 5 of 7 passes for 10 or more air yards for 93 yards on both his touchdown passes as well. Give the guy a lot of credit where credit is due. He's playing against second and third stringers. We get all of that because the Browns didn't play their starters. The Carolina Panthers are the Carolina Panthers. They're one of the worst teams in football. And so we're not going to go beside ourselves about what he did against them because you have to take the opposition into consideration. But as somebody who is a Shedeur Sanders fan, who believed that he got screwed over during draft day or draft night rather, being a 144th pick, 5th round pick, to see him go out there and make some of those requisite throws and show flashes of the kind of potential that he has, I definitely think it was a good.
Shedeur Sanders is going to be one of the richest quarterbacks ever. Prime $14 million in commission from $250 million earned from his jersey sale. A lot of y'all said a brand, the NFL has to cut him a piece in order to access that. So y'all thought they were just trying to teach him a lesson because of his ego. It was because he was a brilliant business mind.
Prime is not blameless, is that he did initially state he wanted some say in terms of where his son was going to go. That if he didn't like the situation his son was in, he was going to pull him up out of there. Stuff like that. On the NFL level, can't do that. And even though it has nothing to do with what I'm about to bring up, they don't want to have a quarterback coming in and they got to worry about his dad making noise about what they're doing, how they're doing it, how effective they are or are not.
Right.
All of those things come into play. And then ultimately, you know, you're an executive and you've got chosen a coach, but the audience is clamoring for dad to come coach his son and all of this other stuff. All of those things are things that an executive or an ownership group is going to be worried about because they're about having control over.
Let me read and explain to you Shedeur Sanders' contract. And then you wonder why every single team in the NFL doesn't want anything to do with Shedeur. Now, if Shedeur wanted to just be a guy that sells jerseys and merchandise and not really worry about football, hey, he's the guy for you. Let's jump into the article and I'll comment from there. And don't hit me with, you don't want to see a young brother make money and all that garbage. Just give me a break. Shedeur is being heavily compensated just for playing football alone.
Stop everything you're doing right now. What I'm about to tell you will completely change how you see NFL power dynamics forever. Imagine getting fired from your dream job on a Thursday morning, and by Thursday afternoon, you've signed a $14 million deal that makes your former boss look like an absolute fool. That's not a fantasy. That's exactly what Shedeur Sanders just did to the Cleveland Browns. And the Browns owner? He found out about it on Twitter. This isn't just a comeback story. This is a masterclass in turning rejection into rocket fuel, and I'm about to break down every single strategic move that left an entire NFL franchise scrambling to explain the biggest mistake of their careers. Welcome back to the channel where we dive deep into the stories that reshape the NFL landscape. I'm your host, and today we're dissecting what might be the most iconic power move in modern football history. If you're here for the real story behind the headlines, the strategic breakdowns they won't show you on ESPN, and the business moves that change everything, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Here's what we're covering today. First, I'll reveal the exact sequence of events that led to Shedeur's release and why it shocked everyone in the building. Then, we'll break down his $14 million response move by move, and trust me, this wasn't luck, this was calculated brilliance. Finally, I'll show you why this decision will haunt the Browns for years and how other teams are already scrambling to avoid making the same mistake. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Shedeur Sanders didn't just get dropped, he got launched into superstardom. Let me paint you the picture of what should have been just another routine Thursday in Cleveland. Picture this, it's 9:47 a.m., coaches are reviewing practice footage, GMs are shuffling through roster evaluations, and somewhere in the sterile hallways of the Browns facility, someone makes a decision that will go down as one of the most catastrophic front office blunders in NFL history. The call comes in. Shedeur Sanders, released. Cut! Dropped like he was just another camp arm fighting for a practice squad spot. No warning. No context. Just a cold, corporate statement about roster evaluation and organizational direction. The internet didn't just react, it exploded. Within minutes, NFL Twitter was having a collective meltdown. Fans were posting crying emojis, analysts were scrambling to make sense of it, and memes were flying faster than Shedeur's spiral in practice. But here's what made this release so shocking. Shedeur wasn't underperforming. He wasn't causing locker room drama. He wasn't posting cryptic Instagram stories or showing up late to meetings. This kid was doing everything right. He was running clean 2-minute drills that had veterans nodding in approval. He was reading defenses like he'd been studying film for a decade, not a season. When Shedeur stepped into the huddle, the chatter stopped. When he called plays, grown men listened. He had that rare combination of natural leadership and technical precision that coaches dream about finding. The stats backed it up too. In limited preseason action, Shedeur was completing passes at a higher rate than half the starting quarterbacks in the league. His decision-making was crisp, his arm strength was undeniable, and his mobility in the pocket showed the kind of poise that usually takes years to develop. Defensive coordinators were already game planning around his dual threat capabilities, and special teams coaches were excited about the field position his scrambling ability could create. So why did they let him walk? The whispers started immediately. Some said it was about culture fit, code for he didn't play the game the way we wanted. Others pointed to internal politics, suggesting that certain coaches felt threatened by his natural leadership presence. The most damaging rumor? That the front office was uncomfortable with his confidence, his social media presence, and his refusal to fade into the background like a typical backup quarterback. But here's the real kicker. While Cleveland was busy trying to justify their decision with corporate speak about difficult roster decisions and organizational philosophy, they completely missed what was happening in real time. Shedeur wasn't sitting at home feeling sorry for himself. He wasn't calling his agent in a panic. He wasn't even surprised. Because what the Browns didn't realize was that they had just handed him the greatest gift possible, complete freedom to control his own narrative. And Shedeur Sanders was about to show the entire NFL what that freedom could create. Now here's where this story transforms from a typical NFL cut to a business school case study. Because what Shedeur Sanders did next wasn't just impressive, it was revolutionary. Instead of waiting by the phone for another team to call, instead of lowering his head and grinding through another tryout, Shedeur flipped the entire playbook and announced his next move with the kind of strategic precision that would make Fortune 500 CEOs jealous. 5 minutes! That's how long it took between the Browns' release announcement and Shedeur's response. Not 5 hours, not 5 days, 5 minutes. He called a press conference that he organized himself, with media partners he had already been courting, announcing the launch of what he called the Locker Room Legacy Project, a $14 million multimedia empire with himself as the centerpiece. Let me break down exactly what this deal includes, because this isn't just some endorsement contract or social media partnership. This is a full-scale business ecosystem. First, there's the Youth Football Development Program targeting underfunded communities across America. We're talking about state-of-the-art training facilities, scholarship programs, and mentorship opportunities that will impact thousands of young athletes. Shedeur isn't just putting his name on this, he's designing the curriculum, selecting the coaches, and personally overseeing the program development. Then there's the media component, a documentary series chronicling not just his rise, but his response to adversity, shot by one of the hottest up-and-coming sports producers in the industry. This isn't some puff piece about overcoming obstacles. This is raw, unfiltered access to how a modern athlete builds a brand, influences culture, and redefines what success looks like in professional sports. The tech investment is where things get really interesting. Shedeur has partnered with a sports technology company developing wearable data-driven gear specifically for quarterbacks in training. We're talking about sensors that track arm angle, release point, footwork patterns, and decision-making speed in real time. This isn't just about improving his own game, he's positioning himself at the forefront of how the next generation of quarterbacks will train and develop. But the foundation component might be the most powerful piece of all. Shedeur has committed to a grant matching program where he'll personally match donations to youth athletics programs across the United States. Every dollar donated gets doubled, creating a multiplier effect that could fund equipment, facilities, and coaching for communities that desperately need it. And here's the beautiful part. While the Browns were scrambling to explain their decision to local media, Shedeur was fielding calls from national brands, international media outlets, and yes, NFL teams who suddenly remembered why they were interested in him in the first place. He didn't just turn rejection into opportunity, he turned it into leverage. He transformed a moment meant to diminish his power into the foundation of an empire that extends far beyond football. The message was clear. You don't get to define Shedeur Sanders by your roster decisions. He'll define himself. Thank you very much. The moment Shedeur's $14 million announcement hit social media, you could practically feel the seismic shift rippling through NFL front offices across the country. But nowhere was that earthquake felt more intensely than in Cleveland, where what started as smug confidence quickly transformed into full-blown panic mode. Picture this scene. Browns owner Jimmy Haslam, sitting in his office, is probably feeling pretty good about the tough decision his front office just made when his phone starts buzzing with notifications. Twitter alerts, text messages, calls from reporters, all asking about Shedeur Sanders' massive business announcement. The same Shedeur Sanders they had just released hours earlier. Haslam didn't find out about the $14 million deal from his GM or his head coach. He found out from social media, just like the rest of us. The mood inside the Browns facility shifted instantly. What had been presented as a calculated roster move suddenly looked like a catastrophic miscalculation. Coaches who had signed off on the decision were now quietly questioning whether they had just let a franchise-changing talent walk out the door. Front office executives who had been confident in their evaluation were suddenly second-guessing every metric they had used to justify the release. But the panic wasn't just about losing Shedeur, it was about what his response revealed about their organization. Here was a young quarterback who had just been cut, and instead of begging for another chance or fading into obscurity, he had immediately pivoted to building something bigger than football. It exposed a fundamental misunderstanding of what modern NFL talent looks like and how today's elite athletes operate. The ripple effects extended far beyond Cleveland. Across the league, other teams were taking notes. Quarterbacks on shaky ground were watching Shedeur's every move, realizing that there were alternatives to quietly accepting whatever role a franchise decided to give them. College athletes were seeing proof that you could bet on yourself, build your own platform, and still command respect from the industry that tried to diminish you. General managers who had passed on Shedeur during the draft were suddenly asking their scouts to take another look at their evaluations. What had they missed? How had they failed to see not just the athletic talent, but the business acumen, the leadership presence, and the cultural influence that Shedeur brought to the table? The most telling side of the league-wide impact? Within 48 hours of Shedeur's announcement, 3 different NFL teams had reached out through back channels, not to offer practice squad spots or backup roles, but to explore what it would take to build a system around his unique skill set and platform. Meanwhile, the Browns were left trying to explain to their fan base why they had let walk a player who was now generating more positive media coverage than their entire roster combined. Season ticket holders were asking questions. Local media was demanding answers. And somewhere in the back of everyone's mind was the same haunting thought: what if we just made the same mistake we made when we passed on other generational talents? The Browns thought they were making a roster decision. What they actually did was provide Shedeur Sanders with the perfect origin story for his empire. What Shedeur Sanders accomplished in the aftermath of his release wasn't just a personal victory, it was the creation of an entirely new blueprint for how modern athletes can navigate, influence, and ultimately transcend the traditional power structures of professional sports. This isn't just about one quarterback's comeback story. This is about the fundamental shift in how talent, influence, and value are defined in today's NFL. For decades, the unwritten rule for young NFL players was simple: keep your head down, wait your turn, don't make waves, and hope the system eventually rewards your patience. Shedeur just shattered that playbook into a million pieces. He proved that in 2025, an athlete's value isn't just determined by their performance on the field, it's determined by their ability to build platforms, influence culture, and create opportunities that extend far beyond the game itself. Think about what this means for the next generation of athletes. High school quarterbacks who are being recruited aren't just thinking about which college program will develop their arm strength or footwork. They're thinking about which program will help them build a brand, develop business acumen, and create the kind of platform that makes them recession-proof in an industry known for ending careers without warning. College athletes with nil opportunities are watching Shedeur's moves like a masterclass in strategic positioning. They're seeing that you don't have to choose between athletic excellence and business development. You can pursue both simultaneously, using each to amplify the other. The quarterback who can throw a perfect spiral and also negotiate a multimedia deal. That's not a distraction from football, that's the future of football. But perhaps most importantly, Shedeur has redefined what leverage looks like in professional sports. Traditional leverage came from performance metrics, draft position, or contract negotiations. Shedeur created leverage through cultural influence, business partnerships, and fan engagement. When he eventually signs with an NFL team, and he won't be negotiating from a position of need. He'll be negotiating from a position of strength, with a platform that extends far beyond whatever uniform he's wearing. The psychological impact on other players cannot be overstated. Across NFL locker rooms, athletes are having conversations about what it means to control your own narrative. Veterans who have spent years playing by the old rules are watching a young quarterback rewrite those rules in real time. Rookies entering the league are seeing proof that you don't have to accept whatever role a franchise assigns to you. You can create your own role, build your own value, and force the industry to adapt to your vision rather than the other way around. This shift terrifies traditional front offices because it challenges their fundamental assumption about power dynamics in professional sports. For years, teams held all the cards. They controlled playing time, media access, and career trajectories. Shedeur just proved that in the age of social media, direct fan engagement, and multimedia partnerships, talented athletes can build their own cards, and sometimes those cards are more valuable than anything a franchise can offer. The Browns thought they were cutting a backup quarterback. What they actually did was launch a revolution. So here we are, watching the aftermath of what might be the most perfectly executed response to professional rejection in modern sports history. Shedeur Sanders didn't just bounce back from getting cut. He used that moment as a launching pad to build something bigger, more influential, and more valuable than anything the Cleveland Browns could have offered him. Let's recap what we've witnessed: a young quarterback who refused to let a franchise define his worth, who turned a moment of rejection into a $14 million empire, and who fundamentally changed the conversation about power, influence, and value in professional sports. The Browns thought they were making a roster decision. What they actually did was provide the perfect case study for why traditional thinking fails in the modern NFL. But here's what makes this story even more compelling: this is just the beginning. Shedeur Sanders has built the platform, established the influence, and created the leverage. Now comes the fun part, watching him use all of that to dominate on the field with a team smart enough to embrace everything he brings to the table. The question isn't whether Shedeur will succeed in the NFL. The question is which franchise will be smart enough to build around not just his athletic ability, but his business acumen, his cultural influence, and his proven ability to turn adversity into opportunity. Now I want to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me, which NFL team should take the shot and sign Shedeur Sanders? Are the Browns going to regret this decision for years to come? And do you think we're witnessing the birth of a completely new model for how elite athletes build their careers? If you found this breakdown as fascinating as I did, smash that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that reshape professional sports, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next in the Shedeur Sanders saga. Because trust me, this story is far from over. And if you want to see how this all plays out, make sure you're subscribed, because when Shedeur signs with his next team and starts torching defenses with the same precision he used to torch expectations, you'll want to be here for every single moment of that victory lap. The Shedeur Sanders story proves that sometimes the best thing that can happen to a star is getting dropped by people who don't understand their value. Click the video on screen now to see more stories of athletes who turn rejection into rocket fuel. And remember, subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the stories that change everything in professional sports. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.